I'm Jonathan Rosenthal, a journalist and foreign correspondent. In the roughly 30 years that I've been working, reporting in the field from some really troubling places, I've come across and seen some really awful things that I've sometimes struggled to cope with. And I've also seen other people in the field who have struggled to deal with the stories they've heard or the things they've seen. Which is why today I'm talking to Jocelyn Blumberg, a clinical psychologist and trauma specialist from Blue Room, about some of the mental health impacts on people who are exposed to traumatic stories. Hi, Jocelyn. Could you start off by just telling me a bit about some of the sorts of people that you've been working with?
Yeah, hi, Jonathan. So we work obviously with journalists like yourself, but also with legal professionals, with ex-military, with researchers, with humanitarian workers, and investigators. And I guess the common thread with all of these people is that they have been impacted in one way or another by the trauma that they've witnessed in the course of their work. It's got under their skins.
So one of the things that's puzzled me over the years is that sometimes people seem to cope with really a lot, and at other times people are really shaken up and struggle to deal with things much sooner. And I wonder if you could just talk me through sort of some of why that is.
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. And I guess the first thing to say is that people are really resilient. And I think that people who are drawn to this sort of work get an enormous amount of purpose and meaning. And they also find it really exciting and edgy. And so, often it can be just an accumulation of this incredibly demanding and often distressing work that can get to them, or something that's been so devastating that it's just breached that kind of protective shield that they have around themselves. Or interestingly, it can also be something quite subtle. So a story or a person that they've connected with in the course of their work that perhaps reminds them of something from their own history or their own experiences. And because of that it just kind of hooks them in a way that they find really disturbing.
And for those people, what are some of the warning signs? What do they experience?
Well, I guess, people, have very different sorts of reactions, and everyone will be different. But I guess, we might meet people in the course of our work who are experiencing, what we would call, classic post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms. They might be having flashbacks or nightmares where they are reliving in a very distressing way the sorts of things that they encountered at work. Or they may be experiencing, I guess, what we would call vicarious traumatisation, where they've heard stories or reviewed evidence that has really transformed them in a way which is very, very negative. And it might make them feel, for example, that absolutely nowhere is safe or that no one can be trusted. And so they feel, profoundly disillusioned. And, all of these sorts of trauma reactions can lead to depression, can lead to anxiety. And because people don't want to talk about these things, because they don't want to remember them, also they often feel that they'll be negatively judged, or that people don't want to hear about the things that they've heard and seen. Then they start to withdraw from people, to withdraw from the people that would actually provide them with support. And, if they've got low mood and low energy, then they stop doing the activities that used to sustain them. And then, people can, struggle to sleep, struggle to relax. They may start to drink a lot, and then, that has its own issues. And, people then can become, what's often termed as sort of burned out, and they just stop being able to function and do the work. Now, people in the big organizations often can be redeployed or leave the conflict zone that they're working in, or they just leave the role entirely. But often they're people who actually live in conflict zones and who are dependent on the work for their survival. And often for these people, the only way that they can cope actually is to just kind of numb out and become desensitized to what's going on around them. And that can be really, really worrying, because they may inadvertently start to place themselves in situations of danger and take risks which make them really vulnerable.
I suppose your comments on safety are quite interesting, because I think a lot of organisations, mine included, are very good at dealing with physical safety, sending us on hostile environment courses, that sort of thing. But I think, they find it much more difficult, or at least people working for them find it much more difficult to talk about some of what they're feeling. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think, that's a sort of multi-pronged answer. And I guess it's, on the one hand, when people are experiencing these things, they often feel really ashamed and inadequate. In the first instance, they feel like, oh, I'm obviously just not up to this job, or I'm weak. They really kind of judge themselves very negatively. Sometimes people, because they're confronted with people going through the most horrific experiences, they often feel, that if they were to talk about their own distress, that they would be sort of making a fuss. So they don't talk about it. And then for the organizations, there's often a kind of a culture of silence, or a lot of stigma around talking about these experiences. And so it's not spoken about, and it's not normalized. And, that just perpetuates the cycle.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think can be done to change or help the situation?
So I think change needs to happen on many levels. I think in the first instance, senior people in organizations need to be able to talk about the mental health impact of working in these sorts of occupations, and that they need to be able to share their own vulnerabilities and their own experiences, and to really model prioritizing self-care. When this happens, junior staff are, given permission to do the same. There also needs to be an investment of time and an investment of money in developing policies and procedures and guidance, so that staff well-being is taken really seriously. And this might mean, for example, training managers to be able to identify and understand when their staff are showing trauma reactions, and having clear procedures to follow in order to get them the support that they need. And then there also needs to be training for individual staff, so that they can learn the protective strategies and techniques for self-care.
And for people who are struggling, if you had just sort of one piece of advice for them, what's the first thing that they should be doing or thinking?
I know it's an overused expression, but really that it is okay not to be okay, and to ask for support, because it's the support that is going to enable you to continue to do this work that matters so much to you.
Well, Jocelyn, thank you. This has certainly given me a lot to think about, and a lot to perhaps take back into my work and the people I'm working with. So thank you very much, Jocelyn.